Commander Eric Hall had seen many strange things in his years aboard the Epsilon space station. He had faced intergalactic diplomats, helped calm rogue AI systems, and even once negotiated a ceasefire between two species on the brink of war. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was seeing right now. In front of him, in the brightly lit corridor of the station, stood Zilvra, a Xelarian maid assigned to cleaning duties. Her translucent blue skin shimmered in the station's artificial light, and her multiple appendages twitched in frustration. Zilvra, like most Xelarians, had an ethereal elegance about her, graceful movements, multi-limbed precision, and an almost serene aura. But today, serenity was the last thing on her mind. The source of her frustration? A human mop. Zilvra, typically so poised and dignified, was struggling with a basic tool of human housekeeping. The mop had become entangled in her tentacle-like arms, water sloshing across the floor. Commander Hall, leaning against the wall a few paces away, couldn't help but suppress a smile as he watched the scene unfold. Zilvra's frustration was palpable. She twisted her body, trying to maneuver the mop handle in a way that made sense for her species, but nothing worked. The mop flopped uselessly against the floor, leaving more water than it absorbed. Are you all right there, Zilvra? Commander Hall finally asked, biting back a chuckle. Zilvra's head snapped toward him, her wide, shimmering eyes narrowing. This human contraption is inefficient, she declared, her melodic voice tinged with annoyance. Why do your people insist on using such primitive tools? Hall stepped closer, still smiling. Primitive, huh? Well, for us, it gets the job done, but I can see how it might be a little tricky for someone with, more limbs. Zilvra straightened, visibly offended by his amusement. I am a Xelarian of the highest order. We are a species that prides ourselves on precision and efficiency. This mop is neither. I see that. Hall couldn't hold back his laughter this time. All right, how about I show you how it's done? Zilvra hesitated, her pride clearly warring with her need for assistance. The Xelarians were known for their technological superiority. They didn't ask for help, especially not from humans. But after another failed attempt to control the mop, she sighed, her tentacles drooping slightly in defeat. Very well, Commander Hall, show me your primitive technique. Hall picked up the mop and gestured for her to watch. It's all about balance, he said, demonstrating how to hold the mop with just two hands, something he quickly realized was easier for a species with only two limbs. Zilvra observed closely, her eyes flicking between his hands and the mop as he expertly swirled it across the wet floor. You've got to apply the right amount of pressure. Push with a bit of force, but not too much. Let the mop do the work, Hall explained, dipping it into the bucket and wringing it out. Zilvra made a small sound of disapproval. Your people actually do this on a regular basis? Manually cleaning your environment? Hall shrugged. It's relaxing for some of us, gives you time to think. Besides, not everything needs to be done with high-tech gadgets. Sometimes the old-fashioned way works just fine. Zilvra tilted her head, as if considering this strange human concept. We Xelarians do not waste time with such trivial tasks. Cleaning is handled by automated systems, flawless and precise. Hall handed the mop to her, waiting for her to give it a try. Well, maybe you're missing out on the joys of manual labor. Zilvra tentatively took the mop in her tentacles, mimicking his earlier movements. The mop slid across the floor with a little more grace than before, though it was still awkward in her multiple limbs. Not bad, Hall said, stepping back. You're getting the hang of it. Zilvra puffed up slightly, her pride returning. It is simple enough, though I still maintain that it is inefficient. Hall chuckled. Yeah, well, not everything in human life is about efficiency. Sometimes it's about just doing. Zilvra fell silent, concentrating on her task. As they continued working side by side, the human and Xelarian, something shifted in the atmosphere. Hall found himself glancing at Zilvra more than once, intrigued by her. The Xelarians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, known for their technology and their precision, but there was a vulnerability to Zilvra now, struggling with something as simple as a mop. And for Zilvra, she was beginning to understand that humans, for all their flaws and inefficiencies, had a kind of resilience and adaptability that she couldn't help but respect. After a few minutes of silence, Zilvra spoke again. I do not understand your people's fascination with physical labor. On my planet, we have eliminated such tasks entirely. Every aspect of our lives is automated. Hall dipped the mop into the bucket again, wringing it out. Well, it's not so much about the labor itself. It's more about taking a break from everything else. Focusing on something simple can be a way to clear your mind. Gives you time to think? Zilvra frowned, her tentacles twitching. I see. So, you find meaning in simplicity? Something like that, Hall said with a shrug. Not everything needs to be about efficiency or progress. Sometimes you just need to slow down. Zilvra stared at him for a moment, as if trying to process the concept. That is a very human way of thinking. Yeah, well, we're a strange species, Hall replied, grinning. As they worked together, something unexpected happened. Zilvra's awkwardness with the mop began to disappear. Her movements became more fluid, more precise. She was adapting, just as Hall had adapted to life on the station, surrounded by alien species. They were learning from each other. Eventually, the floor was clean, the mess gone. Zilvra straightened, looking down at the now pristine corridor with satisfaction. It is done, she declared. See, you've got it, Hall said, giving her an approving nod. Not so bad, right? Zilvra tilted her head, considering his words. It is adequate. Hall chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of the station's systems. Then, Zilvra surprised him by saying, "Thank you, Commander Hall." Hall raised an eyebrow. For what? For assisting me, she said, her voice quieter than before. I do not often ask for help. Hall smiled. Well, you're welcome. Anytime you need a hand with human tools, just let me know. Zilvra nodded, her tentacles swaying slightly. I will. As Zilvra prepared to leave, an unexpected alarm echoed through the corridor, startling both of them. The station's AI voice chimed in, warning, containment breach in Sector C, biohazard detected. Zilvra, still catching her breath from the biohazard containment, seemed to be reflecting as well. Her multi-limbed form shimmered slightly in the low light of the corridor, and her usually poised expression held a trace of vulnerability. Hall could tell that her pride, which once kept her from asking for help, was slowly being replaced by something else, trust. I must admit, Zilvra began, breaking the silence. I did not expect your assistance to be so vital. Hall chuckled, shaking his head. Hey, we humans aren't all bad. You know, we may not have the advanced tech you Xelarians do, but we've got our own ways of getting things done. Zilvra tilted her head, contemplating his words. I see that now. Your species has an adaptability I had not considered. It is commendable. Well, thanks, Hall said, smiling, and you're not so bad yourself. You handled that biohazard like a pro. Zilvra's tentacles shifted in what Hall had come to recognize as a Xelarian version of a shrug. I have had experience with such matters. Xelarians are trained from a young age to deal with technical malfunctions. It is part of our discipline. Discipline, huh? Hall leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. That seems to be a big part of your culture. Zilvra nodded. Indeed, we are taught that precision and discipline are the keys to success. Every task, no matter how small, must be performed with exactitude. Hall raised an eyebrow. Even cleaning? Zilvra hesitated for a moment before responding. Yes, even cleaning. Though, as I have learned today, human methods can be less precise. Hall laughed. Yeah, we've got our quirks, but you handled it well. I'd say you've got a good handle on human cleaning techniques now. Zilvra gave a small nod of acknowledgement, though there was a hint of humor in her eyes. Perhaps, though I still believe Xelarian methods are superior. Hall grinned. Fair enough. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the events of the day. The biohazard breach had been a close call, but they had managed to handle it together. Hall couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in their teamwork. Commander Hall, Zilvra said suddenly, her voice quieter than before, I must thank you again, not just for today, but for teaching me. It is not often that I seek assistance from others, especially not from humans. Hall smiled, sensing the weight of her words. Well, I'm glad I could help, and for what it's worth, I've learned a lot from you too. You Xelarians have a lot to offer. Zilvra's gaze softened. Perhaps we have more in common than I initially thought. Yeah, Hall agreed, I think we do. Another silence settled between them, but this one was different, more comfortable, more natural. The human and the alien Maid, who had started the day as near strangers, now stood together as partners, their mutual respect deepened by their shared experience. "Commander," Zilvra said after a while, "there is one more thing I would like to ask of you." Hall raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Zilvra hesitated for a moment, her tentacles shifting slightly. "I would like to teach you a Xelarian method of cleaning, if you are interested, of course." Hall blinked in surprise, then grinned. "A Xelarian cleaning technique? Now that I've got to see." Zilvra's lips curved into a small smile. "Very well, follow me." She led him to the station's storage area, where various cleaning supplies were kept. Zilvra reached for a small device that Hall hadn't noticed before. Sleek, metallic, and far more advanced than the mops and buckets humans used. "This," Zilvra said, holding up the device, "is a Xelarian nanocleanser. It uses microscopic particles to eliminate all forms of dirt and contaminants, far more efficient than your mop." Hall whistled, impressed. "That's some fancy tech." Zilvra handed him the device. "Try it." Hall took the device, examining it closely before activating it. The nanocleanser hummed to life, and as he moved it across a surface, he watched in amazement as it effortlessly cleaned everything in its path. The station floor gleamed, completely spotless. "Wow," Hall muttered, "that's incredible." Zilvra's eyes twinkled with amusement. "It is. As I said, Xelarian methods are superior." Hall laughed, handing the device back to her. "All right, I'll give you that one, but I still think there's something to be said for the good old-fashioned human way." Zilvra tilted her head. "Perhaps, though, I must admit, there is a certain satisfaction in manual labor. I can understand why you find it relaxing." Hall grinned. "See, we're not so different after all." Zilvra's gaze softened as she looked at him. "No, we are not." They stood there for a moment, sharing a quiet understanding. The human and the alien Maid, two beings from completely different worlds, had found common ground in the most unexpected of places: a mop, a bucket, and a shared sense of purpose. "Well, Zilvra," Hall said, breaking the silence, "I'd say we make a pretty good team." Zilvra nodded, her tentacles swaying gently. "Indeed we do, Commander Hall, indeed we do." And with that, they turned and walked side by side down the corridor, ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store for them next.